Hi, my name is Shahid Shah. I'm coming to you from the show floor at HIMSS 16 at the SAP booth. I'm standing here next to Souvik, who just did a great presentation on accountable care organizations and what their data needs are and why it's so hard to do analytics these days with just the idea that you have only a few data sources. He explained how lots and lots of data sources are coming in faster and faster than ever before, and the idea of having early binding known structures in advance where you can just bring in data into a predefined data set and data structure is near impossible these days just because of the speed at which they're coming in. So I wanted to chat with him a little bit because he just gave such a nice presentation and really try to understand what did Sutter go through, not from a cheerleading perspective, but really understanding what was hard, what would they do differently, and what were some of the areas where early failures occurred that maybe some of our viewers might benefit from so they won't make the same mistakes again. So I just want to say hi, Souvik, thanks for joining us.
Shahid. Hello.
All right, so now in your presentation, I really liked one thing that you said, that prioritization for analytics should be that around what we can provide the most impact on, right? So at Sutter, as a principal data scientist and a big data expert, you could work on 100 different things, and of course that's one of our biggest problems. So tell us a little bit, what did you mean by what has the highest impact to you, your patients, Sutter? What was that calculus?
Yeah, so at Sutter Health, when we tried to execute on all these data science projects, what we found is that not all parts of the organization appreciate the effort. Mm-hmm. So we had to figure out a way to create a prioritization matrix. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of how each project was given a certain point and how we did the calculations. But the general principle was that anything that impacts patient care, anything that has a potential to increase the quality of care that we provide patients, that should float right at the top of the list. Because we are a not-for-profit company who focuses on providing the best quality of care to patients. The second, which is pretty important these days, is anything that increases revenue because of the fact that all healthcare network providers are facing price pressure. We need to increase our revenues. So that's a very important criteria. The third one, of course, is cost cutting. Anything that increases efficiency, gets rid of redundancy, and yet does not impact patient care or quality of care adversely, we would want to execute on those.
Okay, no, that's pretty nice. I think that gives us a way to think about this and say, okay, if it affects patient outcomes or can generate revenue or can increase margins, which is hopefully with cost, that prioritization. Now you made it sound pretty easy. Was it easy? Was it? Are you still going through that effort, or is it one and done? What does it look like?
So when we started out, we had one version of it. Over time, it has changed, and it is still changing based on input that we get from different parts of the organization. So for example, initially we thought that a really fantastic use case would be to track asthma patients when they come to ED and allocate resources, care resources to the ED accordingly. But that does not necessarily mean that we will have the greatest impact on quality of care. Yes, of course, we would be able to reduce redundancy of nurses in certain ED departments, but that wasn't the top priority, or it wouldn't have the impact that we would have if we reduce sepsis or if we reduce the risk of readmissions, for example, or if you carried out something like the ACO program. So over time it changes. It's not set in stone, but however we try to stick to it as much as possible.
Okay, that's great. So you've been doing this since about 2011. So as you look around the show floor here, everybody's making it sound like this is something new, right? Analytics is brand new, or big data might be new. After doing it for about 5 years now, what do you look back on and say, I wish we did this slightly differently, and then it wouldn't have taken us 5 years to get to here. It could have done it in 2 years or 3 years. Or no, this journey takes a long time because it's just hard, and it doesn't matter how much planning you do, there's so much that you don't know that it's going to take time. Which one do you think is more right?
Okay, so I'll just give a little clarification before I answer that. So we have been working on the ACO part of the project for 5 years, but the big data and data science is much more recent. So I'll take the ACO example because it kind of typifies all the struggles that any organization I would think would go through. So when ACO started out, We started out on our traditional data warehouse platforms, on SQL servers, using ETL tools, and they can carry you only so far. The moment the volume of patients increased multiple times and reached several thousands, we realized that our systems were becoming slower and slower, till a point came that we were almost close to violating our 8 a.m. SLA time. So that's when we needed to relook at the architecture and the platforms. And looking back with hindsight 2020, what I'm realizing is that when we look at the architecture, we focused more from a technology perspective and missed some of the organizational changes that should have followed with it. So for example, we got Cloudera in, we got SAP in, we had plenty of data science programming like Python, R, SAP's Infinite Insight, all of those in.
And you had Informatica already in the shop at the time?
It was already in there. Yeah. It was one of the many ETL tools we have. But what we fail to realize is that you don't find a Hadoop resource that easily. You don't find a SAP HANA resource that easily. Although HANA is much more SQL friendly, and therefore you can train your previous SQL developers to use SAP's HANA platform. Found that for Hadoop, really needed somebody who understood Java, who understands shell scripting, who has a Unix background, and it doesn't come easy with an ETL developer. So that should have been something that we should have taken care of instead of simply relying on our existing developers. That's one. The second thing that we learned really fast was if you want to fail small, fail early. For example, when we tried to integrate HANA and Hadoop together, we had to struggle through it. But fortunately, we didn't have anything live on those platforms at that time, so we didn't pay a price for it. The third thing that we learned was all these initiatives are going to fail unless there is a buy-in at the top level of the executive suite. And they're also going to fail if you do not have the definitions of the KPIs really well nailed down. They may be different for different parts of the organization, but that definition should exist so that we can code according to that requirement.
No, that's great. I mean, from a summary perspective, what we're saying is that it's going to be hard, right? There's nothing easy about it, but nothing worth doing is easy, right? So the tools, it sounds like, are in place, whether it's ETL, whether it's HANA from an in-memory database processing perspective, you've got Hadoop in the layer, so the tooling is there, the processes you have to create yourself at Sutter, but finding the right resource, it looked like one of your biggest concerns, and so if you were looking back on this and saying, if we got specialists in each one of these areas to get things started, then other non-specialists could potentially take over. Is that where you are today, or do you still have specialists in each environment?
We have specialists on the HANA environment and Hadoop environment. What we are trying to do is adopt a flex model so that those specialists are really the core team, and when and as needed, we can get contract workers who can aid them to maybe complete a certain project by a certain deadline. But if something doesn't have that from a deadline, we are happy to have a resource do most of the work.
Very good. Well, this was great. I really appreciate your time. I really loved the presentation you just did at the SAP booth, and hopefully we'll get together and do this, a bit more detailed version of this, because I think there's so many people that can learn from both the success as well as the learnings that you've gone through, that we should do that. So I want to just say thank you on behalf of Souvik Das from Sutter Health, Principal Data Scientist and Big Data Architect at Sutter Health, and we'll see you next time on the show floor.
Thank you, Shahid.